Hello, back again. My name's Stella. I'm a clinical therapist, psychotherapist, counsellor, call me what you like really. I've been in the field for many years, had lots and lots of client experience, and just wanted to share some of what I've learned and along the way with people on here that perhaps would never walk into a counsellor's office, or because of time, money, energy, just wouldn't do it. And I think there's a lot of people that wouldn't, and that's fair enough. I wanted to share, I suppose, for me, what it means to be a therapist and what therapy looks like to me, and what I judge as good therapy. I know a lot of clients come in and they tend to say the same things, and they went and saw a therapist who just sat and listened and didn't really give them any practical skills or ways of going about life or even healing. And I find that quite interesting, because I think a lot of people think counselling or therapy, they don't really understand, or that maybe they're not sure what they want. And so they get told to go somewhere or see someone, even a psychologist, and they aren't really sure. And I think for me, I just kind of want to empower people to actually get their needs met. If you want to just sit and listen, talk to someone and for them to listen, then that's what you need to employ. You're paying people to get your needs met. And I think a lot of people perhaps don't realize what they need. And that's why they go and see a therapist and they're not really satisfied, or didn't really get what they wanted, or didn't even really know what it was all about. And so maybe to help people understand, to figure out what it is you think you need. For example, if you've had a lot of trauma or early childhood stuff that deep in your heart you probably haven't really dealt with, and it's impacting on your daily life, maybe you're depressed or anxious or worried, or you've got a lot of fear happening, and deep in your heart that you probably need to go do some work or talk to someone. I think in those circumstances, you don't need someone that's just going to listen. I mean, of course, listen, because that's validating your experience, and that can be very healing, don't get me wrong. But a lot of the time, you need actually to be quite proactive in your healing process. I often liken it to going to the gym. When you go to the gym, you don't just sit on the bench and watch people, exercise. You actually get on the treadmill, you get on the weights, and you actually do it. And it's actually quite painful. It's tiring, it's exhausting. And, afterwards, your muscles and limbs might ache and you might feel sore. And I do think that's a little bit like therapy. It's sometimes really uncomfortable to sit and talk about things and have someone understand it in a way, because we're all seeking to be understood. And I get that. It's but no one can really understand or kind of understand what you've been through. And for me, it's about helping clients come to a sense of peace about, no, it's not about me fully understanding, because I never will, and I can't. I can be empathic to what somebody's been through, but can anyone really ever understand what someone else has experienced in their life? Probably not. From my perspective, it's about helping people understand themselves. Because in the understanding, and sometimes, I don't know, are things beyond understanding? I mean, if parents were cruel and harsh and, not easy to be with because they had their own issues or they had their own mental health problems, yes, you can understand that. And I think understanding goes a long way. It's a bit like awareness. Awareness and understanding is half of it. The other half is coming to a sense of peace within your own being about it. You can't just get it right here. You've got to get it right here in the heart space, where in the body, because it's the actual body that holds the score. The mind will remember it and bring it into your memory banks, because your heart hasn't healed it. Your body's still holding the pain of it. And for me, therapy is a very proactive thing that you do. And when you talk to someone and you understand what their past is, what their issues are, how it's impacting them in their now, you can sort of offer that. And this is what probably I do. Some people just want to come and talk about one specific thing that's really bothering them, and so that's one piece of work. But then there's other people who are struggling with their own personality traits, because those traits have been created through their childhood trauma. They've been playing out and maybe compounded in their adult life, and they're just done with the same old, relating or drawing towards them the same kind of people, attracting the same kind of personality types, and they're done, and they realize that maybe the common denominator is themselves. So, and for me, healing is something, if you heal, then you will change. You can either do it from the outside in, which is change, but I don't think that works. I think that's what we've been taught. Behavior therapy is about change your behaviors. And yes, that can help. Don't get me wrong. I'm not throwing out the baby with the bathwater. But for me, if you heal, then ultimately I think you do change. You change on the inside. You see the world very differently. And what I do is, I suppose over the years and my own experiences, I've got together what I believe is something that really helps you change on the inside. So we start here, because if you create a more healthy mindset, then the body learns to sit more in the body space where the uncomfortable feelings are. If you try and take someone into very heavy duty feelings that they haven't processed before you kind of change the way they think about themselves, then that can be re-traumatizing, it can be re-triggering. And this is why, if you know anything about the rooms NAAA, at step 4, they start to do that list of resentments, and a lot of people struggle with that because they haven't been coached and learned and taught to manage how to sit in uncomfortable places. That's why they are in addiction sometimes, because it's a coping mechanism. So that's what I offer when people come in, and if they want to, really, I think being a good therapist, the art of therapy is figuring out what people need and then helping them get that need met. So for me, maybe someone just wants to come in and talk. Fine. I'll just reflect back and I can summarize and I can validate and I can do all of that. If someone actually wants to be more proactive, great, I can do that too. And suppose for me, the art of therapy is sitting with someone in a very present sense, using what I've learned, my learned experience of what I went through, and also being able to use my intuitive knowing to feel my way through that relationship that you create with a client, and hopefully help them feel safe enough to do some work. And that's what I think good therapy is about, in my opinion. And that's just my opinion. So if you disagree, that's fine. You're allowed to disagree. And as you create that safe space for someone to sit in, all the dark shame will come because there's no judgment here. And I think a lot of people are so terrified of being judged, and they daren't say these things out loud. And for me, it's about bring it on, just say it. There's no judgment from this end, more judgment on their end probably about how they feel about themselves than there is from here. And that's the gift that I think you can bring to a relationship in the therapeutic environment. So I just wanted to explain what I believe is good therapy and what it might take to have a very positive experience. The other thing I want to say is I think a lot of people go to therapy and it works. Doesn't matter what that person's doing or how they work. It does work, but then they tend to revert back. We revert back to our old coping mechanisms, don't we? And we just do, because it's our set point. We've all got a set point, and hit with enough stress and struggle, we'll kind of revert back to that set point. Well, if that set point is, is very negative about self, then that's kind of where we'll go. And for me, I want to help people change that set point, and that's what the rewiring of the mind, re-scripting the script that you created when you were very young, which has just been compounded through life perhaps. And this is when people come in and say, well, I know I'm lovable, but I don't feel lovable. I know I'm this, but I don't feel that. I know people around me that love and care for me, but I don't actually feel loved and cared for. And so can you see the mismatch between the head and the heart? And for me, it's about bringing those two things into alignment. They call it, there's a whole sort of field of, heart, brain coherence. Greg Braden is a big purveyor of that. Who's the other one? Oh gosh, I can't think of his name at the moment, but Greg Braden, Bruce, I'll put it somewhere down there, Bruce Lipton. They talk about that. So if you want to check that out more in depth, I think there's a heart mind coherent sort of YouTube channel. So there's lots of things you can go explore to kind of work out how we get this from this to this, which I think is something that is really important to do. Anyway, I just wanted to sort of share that with people because I think that's what people are aching for. They're aching, and they go and see a therapist, and if they didn't get their needs met or it wasn't helpful, then excuse me, people never go back, and they think, oh yeah, and they judge all therapists by that one experience. And that's fair enough, that's what we do, but it doesn't have to be that. So to empower you to figure out what it is that you think you need, because you are the expert of you, that other person isn't the expert of you. Maybe they've done a lot of work and they feel like they've, achieved a certain amount of expertise, and I feel that way. I feel like, I've been in the field for many, many years, done a lot of study, had my own program of recovery, and I bring all that into the experience. And therefore, maybe I can help some people. Not all. I'm sure haven't helped everybody, and that's okay. Can't help everybody. Sometimes you just don't gel with someone. But that's important, to feel like you can gel with someone. So I just want to encourage you, reach out, figure out what you think you need. Go find the person, interview your therapist. I'm astounded why, more people don't come in. I only have people that come by recommendation. I don't advertise or anything. It's just word of mouth. And so I know if someone's had a good experience, then they will relate that. And so they come in with almost more hope. And I think that really works well. It's nice to be recommended. I don't know about you, I love recommendations. You feel like, that's a great thing. So figure out what you want, what you need, and do some checking. For me, I feel like a therapist has to be doing their own work, because if they're not, there'll be a lot of counter transference, and they will project onto you. And so if they have a lot of issues in their own lives, you're dealing with someone's ego at that point. Anyway, we could talk more about that, but I think I'll leave that for now. Just give you a good insight into what I believe good therapy can and is, and how it can be helpful. Anyway, all for now. See you next time. Bye.